Trump's big foreign policy bets. Biden commutes the sentences of 37 people on death row, and Honda and Nissan may merge to reshape the automobile landscape. This and more on Dangerous Waters. This is the Dangerous Waters podcast, where we dive deep into dangerous waters. I'm your host, Alex, and in today's episode, we got some big moves coming in from Trump and Biden, as well as a lot more, so let's get straight into it. Our first story of the day is Trump's big foreign policy bets. He's been making a lot of moves, a lot of noise recently, and a lot of it is based on foreign policy. Very interesting stuff here. The first one is Trump's attitude toward the Panama Canal. Basically, what Trump wants to do here is he wants to repatriate the Panama Canal back to the hands of the U.S. and U.S. control. Back during the Jimmy Carter era, Carter decided to essentially donate the Panama Canal's ownership to Panama themselves. This canal historically was built by the labor and hands of the United States. We built this canal, and now Trump wants it back. Now, why does he want it back, and why is this canal so important? The Panama Canal is one of the world's largest shipping hubs because it allows ships to transport cargo through Central America rather than making it around the entirety of South America. Very dangerous waters, actually, and it extends shipping times by multiple weeks. This is why if ships can go through the middle of Central America, they save a lot of time, a lot of money. But at the same time, Trump's been concerned about this because he believes, at least he said this on an interview with Tucker back in the day, was that he thinks the Panama Canal is slowly being controlled by China. We have Chinese interests, potentially Chinese software, Chinese operators that are slowly encroaching on this project. And Trump wants to take it back under the control of the U.S. to make sure that China does not have this type of influence on the Panama Canal. At the same time, he seems to be really pushing this. He's made multiple Truth Social posts saying we should make it the United States Canal. He posted a AI-generated image of the Panama Canal with a beautiful big United States flag right in the center of it. So a lot of this rhetoric, a lot of going back and forth, including from the Panamese president, in which he said the canal currently is under Panama's control and it will remain under Panama's control, in which Trump responded, "We'll see about that." So there's a lot of tension going on there. A very interesting place to pick fights. But at the same time, it shows Trump's unconventional foreign policy. He's unpredictable. He will make moves like this, and a lot of times he gets his way. So we'll see if he's able to secure the Panama Canal under his administration. Another big one is he actually flirted with this idea during his first administration, but he wants to buy Greenland. Greenland obviously being a very large island up near the North Pole. It's between the continental United States as well as Europe, sort of a midway point. A very large island, and Trump has floated the idea of trying to buy it out and turn it into United States land. He's made similar rhetoric in the past as well. He's posted a big, beautiful Trump Tower in the middle of Greenland back during his first administration. So we're seeing these ideas come back. We're seeing the Trump that we've always thought he would be. This is a very typical Trump move in which he comes out with these crazy ideas, but somehow he ends up implementing some of them. So as with the Panama Canal, who knows? I don't think it's likely that they will sell Greenland to the United States, but anything's possible at this point. Things are changing. The next one is that we have a Trump team flirting with a soft invasion of Mexico to take out the drug cartels. This is a very interesting proposition, and Trump has actually talked about this as well in the past, in which he wanted to send U.S. Special Forces into Mexico to dismantle the cartels. Now it looks like Trump's team is working with this idea as well. They might consider doing something like this. I would imagine if they do, it would have to be with the approval of the Mexican presidents. Obviously, they both have interests in trying to take down these cartels. The Mexican government doesn't want these cartels in there either. Hopefully, some kind of agreement can be made here so that it doesn't have to get too contentious between the two countries, because ultimately, having friendly U.S.-Mexico relations is always a benefit. A lot of moves here, a lot of potential. We can only see with time. For our next story, we have Biden commuting the sentences of 37 prisoners on death row. Very big news. Essentially, what this means is that he has now placed the statuses of 37 death row inmates into life in prison without parole. So he is basically using this as a form of protest against what is going on at the federal government with executions. And his stance is that executions should only be reserved for cases of terrorism and hate-motivated mass murder. So these 37 people did not fit that criteria of his, and therefore he has commuted their sentences. Keep in mind, the commutation does not mean pardoning, so they are still going to be in prison for the rest of their life without the possibility of parole, but they will no longer be put on death row. The end of one's presidency, especially knowing that they won't serve a second term, is really telling. A lot of political actions, personal actions come out, especially when it comes to the clemency process and the pardoning process, because the president has full jurisdiction over what these people can serve, their sentences, all of that. So we have a lot of movement coming in from Biden. We saw this with Trump too toward the end of his first administration, but Biden is coming in. He is putting out his hat in the ring, saying that this is my stance on these things. First, he pardoned Hunter. Then he commuted the sentences of around 1,500 people, as well as pardoning another 39. And now he is back with another 37 commutations of death row inmates. I believe that toward the end of his administration, especially in the final days, we will see even more of these actions, potentially more controversial as well. Now let's get into some world news. We have a very fascinating story here coming in from the Japanese auto industry. Honda and Nissan are planning to merge in 2026. They want to stay competitive in the world scene, and they believe that this merger is the only way to make that happen. They are facing increasing competition from all different angles, but they specifically cited Chinese automakers, especially in the EV industry, have really been pushing them out of the space. China has been exporting millions upon millions of cars. They are really dominating in the EV scene, whereas Japan has been seeing a regression over time. So they're hoping that the Honda and Nissan merger will potentially give them the resources to fight back against Chinese automakers by 2030. That's what they said. We also see that potentially Mitsubishi could be joining into this merger. Nissan holds a large stake in Mitsubishi, and they also see similar sentiments, and they will decide by the end of January what they want to do with this merger. Now, this is a very interesting story because it's not something you see often, but also the combination of these brands is a risky bet. They have pretty decent market spaces carved out for them, at least outside of the EU and Asian markets. A lot of American consumers buy Honda, buy Nissan, not as much Mitsubishi nowadays, but you do see a lot of that space already carved out for them, but they do see that increasing risk of the EVs from China encroaching on their market share. So this is obviously a move that is highly, highly risky. It could play off. It maybe won't. I don't know. By 2026, we'll find out. But these Japanese car makers are really putting everything on the table. They really have nothing left to lose at this point. They know that if they don't do anything risky, if they don't do anything drastic, they might end up losing it all. So this is really their last major play. Let's see if it works out for them. I really hope it does, because at least in my opinion, I think Honda makes great cars. Nissan also has a very fabulous selection as well. So we'll see. Our next story is about Iran, and this is a very interesting irony because Iran is facing massive energy struggles at this point, despite having the second largest proven natural gas reserves in the world behind Russia and the fourth largest proven crude oil reserves. They are a country rich with energy. Unfortunately, mismanagement in the country, the inability to properly allocate resources and plan for the future has really caused them this major shortcoming. What we're seeing now is massive energy shortages going across the country. We have places in which all of a sudden massive blackouts will happen hours at a time, completely unannounced. Cell networks, communications are down. And the irony is that the Iranian government is blaming its own people for this move because they're saying, oh, Iranians are spending too much energy. They usually, if you compare Iran's usage of energy compared to other countries, are doing a lot higher. You should lower the temperature of your house during the winter, all of these types of things. And really what it shows is that they really have no idea what they're doing at this point. And the problem has gotten so bad, and it's really telling. What's going on is that Iran only has so much energy they can allocate, and they're now choosing to allocate that energy to the households rather than the industrial setting. So we're seeing a lot of industrial power cuts, just complete withdrawal of energy from major industries, including the energy industry responsible for generating the energy in the first place. And they're now saying that this could also extend into next year. Next year's winter could be even worse than what is already going on here. And this is really the second part of the irony, because Iran cares so much about their military power, they care so much about trying to stick it to the rest of the world, but at the same time they realize that if the people revolt, if they are angry with the government enough, what we're going to see is an uprising. And the Iranian regime's biggest fear at this point, considering the toppling down of their proxies over the past few years, is that their regime will also be toppled by the people. And we're seeing large disapproval within the country as well during the past couple of months, especially toward Iranian leadership. So much so that even top Iranian propagandists are saying 50 to 70% of the Iranian population wants to see the regime fall. So this is some very big developments, and Iran has to very carefully play these cards to ensure that they are able to even survive to the next year, especially with all of these massive disruptions to civilian life. Now for our next story, let's talk about what happened during the latest US strike on Iran as an F-A-18 fighter was leaving the Harry Truman aircraft carrier. Just after leaving, it got shot down by the USS Gettysburg, a guided missile cruiser. Essentially, the details of this are still unknown, but it shows the harsh operating conditions that the US is under, especially considering the Houthi fire, missiles, artillery, all that stuff being aimed toward US ships. A lot of dangerous things going on here, and unfortunately, it resulted in the loss of an F-A-18. Both pilots in the fighter jet did eject properly and survived, one with minor injuries, so ultimately not too big of a deal for them. However, there's no two ways of looking at this. This is a failure of the US military, and hopefully they can remedy this situation in the future. We've seen a lot of these friendly fire shootdowns in Russia as well, so things happen, right? You can't always expect things to work smoothly. But we've also seen a lot of misinformation coming out regarding this incident, in which pro-Houthi or pro-Iranian or pro-Russian sources are saying that the Houthis shot them down with these special air defense systems that they got from Iran. All sorts of these wild conspiracy theories that make no sense. The F-A-18 is one of the most powerful fourth-generation fighters in the world, with a lot of countermeasures, and really only the technology of a country like the United States, China, or Russia would be able to shoot one down. Iran has a barely functioning air force. They don't have the technology to create these air defense systems that are fully capable of shooting down these planes. They have no idea what to expect even. The air defense missiles that they currently use are reverse engineered missiles from the US that were made in the 70s. So this is not a country that is capable of really presenting a powerful threat, especially considering the proximity that the plane had as it was just leaving the aircraft carrier. Iran and the Houthis just do not have this level of technology to do so. So anyone who claims that Iran or the Houthis shot down this plane directly are just lying. However, it does show that the operating environment of the US is more dangerous because of the drone strikes and the missile strikes that the Houthis have been conducting against US ships. Let's get into rapid fire news from People. Man arrested for setting woman on fire in brutal senseless homicide inside New York City subway car. From CNN, Ex-US fighter pilot accused of training Chinese military will be extradited to the United States. From CBS News, Philippines says it will acquire US Typhoon missile system, sparking warnings from China. And from the South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff, 1,100 North Korean soldiers have been killed or wounded so far in Russia's war in Ukraine. And finally, from Iran International, new Damascus government closes Syrian airspace to all Iranian flights, military and civilian. With that being said, thank you for sticking to the end of today's Dangerous Waters podcast episode. If you enjoyed, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and as always, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever you celebrate, and I'll see you all in the next one.